Welcome back, everyone. How did you enjoy the break? Did you like it? Everybody who met someone they didn't know before, raise your hand. Okay. Almost half of the people. The other half, next break, use your next break to meet someone you don't know. Make a new acquaintance. All right, next on the agenda, we have a panel discussion about education for startups. And I would like to invite our moderator on stage, Veneta Andonova. Veneta is a professor. Veneta is a professor at the American University and also a big friend of the startup community in Bulgaria.
Thank you very much. It's my biggest pleasure to be part of this event and to be the host of the panel. And I'll now introduce the speakers. Bob Dorf is the author of the Startup Owner's Manual, the step-by-step guide for building a great company. He's an expert in customer development. Please help me welcome Bob Dorf. Milena Stoycheva is the CEO of Junior Achievement Bulgaria. She's an entrepreneur and an educator. Please, let's welcome Milena. And our third participant today will be Tobias, a co-founder of the EyeFocus Accelerator, a new accelerator launching in Berlin in 2015, and a friend of Bulgaria who has been around since more than 12 years. So we're here to discuss a topic about which we all feel very passionate, and it's about education for startups. And I'd like to open the discussion with a provocative question. And my question is, there are a lot of very visible, successful startups whose founders are college dropouts. How this fact affects our thinking about entrepreneurial education? May I invite you to start, Bob?
Sure. I think this sort of movement of encouraging young people to spend less time getting a basic education, basic building blocks of life skills and life learning is silly. It's foolish. We all need a solid foundation, and the odds of someone being significantly more successful because they started their first startup instead of finishing college are so small that the, so to speak, return on investment from dropping out of college is horrible compared to the value of the life skills and foundational education. And I think it is, like, is it Peter Thiel that's paying young entrepreneurs $100,000 to drop out of college? I think shame on him, in my opinion.
I'm very glad to hear you say that. I think also, as we all know, startups are very likely to fail. And if you drop out of college to do your startup and then fail, you don't have your degree to fall back on. But just one of the things about your statistic, there's a very high correlation between entrepreneurship and dyslexia. So actually, a lot of the college dropouts who started successful companies are also dyslexic. Personally, as a dyslexic entrepreneur, I think on his third degree in 10th year of university, I think the two are compatible. I think most of the skills I gained at university I use in entrepreneurship as well.
Thank you. Milena, would you like to add?
Well, it is actually, to me, okay. Rather nicely surprising to hear both of Bob and Toby say something that I have been preaching. I think it's really, I wouldn't put it as a juxtaposition, dropping out of college versus, and being entrepreneurial versus being well-educated or having the good grounds to be good in analyzing your environment. Because to me, it's not a question of dropping out of education. Maybe the education that is around is not challenging and good enough for some people so that they really stay and continue to develop their knowledge and skills.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like now to encourage the audience here in the room to use the opportunity to ask questions and to vote to the questions that others have posted. What you see here on the screen is the count of the most popular questions, and those will be subject to our guest discussions in the last 10 minutes of this panel, so please be active and use the tool. Now I'd like to direct the conversation as to how do we measure the effectiveness of education for entrepreneurs, because the previous lecture was about the importance of metrics and of understanding how effective we are in what we do. How shall we approach this?
Can I bounce that question? Can I bounce that question back to Bob with a first point, which we were just discussing before? In an entrepreneurial degree, something like a degree in entrepreneurship, are we teaching people to take risk and have ideas, therefore be entrepreneurs, or are we teaching entrepreneurs the skills they need to do their startups, which I think then ties into your question?
Well, I don't believe we can teach passion and drive and commitment. That's somewhat almost genetic. It can be a skill you can nurture and cultivate, but all the sort of Tony Robbins videos in the world aren't going to turn a couch potato into an ambitious, driven animal. And I believe the job of entrepreneurship education is to teach the tools. Whether it's customer development or software, coding or selling skills or digital marketing, those are the tools that entrepreneurs use to build successful businesses. But if they don't have the commitment, the passion, the drive, and a little bit, right, there's an old saying that there's a very fine line between insanity and genius. And the entrepreneurs need a little bit of both to take on this crazy, high-risk, high-reward, career path.
I would further that by just saying that I come from a culture where traditionally in the UK, you would study anything and then have a job. So you might study English and become a lawyer later. Whereas I think in most other cultures in Europe, it's more normal to study what you're going to do. But what I found is, I studied archaeology. There are transferable skills in all higher education, learning how to manage your time, structure your ideas, learning how to write. And when I'm mentoring, which I do a lot around Europe, those are the three things I pick people up on. It's amazing how many of the startups can't do basic time management, structuring ideas, and writing. So I think the education, a lot of the education is generic. It's relevant.
Well, it's funny, you studied archaeology. I studied Old English literature and read Beowulf in the original edition. For some strange reason, it was the 60s, whatever. But to your question about dropping out of college, I started several businesses in college, one of which was a job matching service to help students at the college get jobs at the businesses in town. It was a lovely little business. I sold it for a little money when I graduated, but the most important thing was it got me the job that launched my career back when I was an employee. Got a call one Saturday morning. Hi, I'm the news director of the radio station in town, looking for an English major, a junior or a senior with a car who I can trust to show up for work at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I said, don't move, I'll be right there. Got the job and graduated from college barely, because I was too busy to go to classes, graduated with 2 years of professional news broadcasting experience that launched my career. So there sometimes can be a balance between showing up at every class, getting the diploma, learning the basics, and beginning your entrepreneurial career, while you're there. I'm sure junior achievement encourages that more than anyone.
Archaeology involved turning up somewhere, creating a team, managing the team, and executing something. And that's a completely transferable skill.
Well, more than Beowulf, I assure you.
I'd like to call your attention to one of the questions that is getting so much attention by our audience. And it's the question about what is the number one habit that is a prerequisite for becoming a successful entrepreneur. And I wonder, as educators in that field, what your recommendation will be.
Well, I think a successful entrepreneur would be anyone, I would find anyone who's actually managed to turn one idea into reality, to make it happen, and that if this idea was something that they really have been perceiving very strongly, that really beats in their heart too. But to me, maybe I think it's really to be open-minded and disciplined about what you want to do.
Would you like to recommend something, Toby?
For an entrepreneur, they understand that every day is Wednesday. They don't have weekends.
And I think, actually, I go back to one of the students I had in the summer semester at Columbia, young woman with a mediocre idea for a sort of e-commerce, fashion, direct-to-the-consumer marketplace for high-end ladies' business blouses. And I was beating on this woman saying, how are you going to test this? How are you going to prove it? How are you going to show an investor that this is a good risk? And she said, well, I am sure I can raise the money. I've already talked to people who are willing to give me the money. And I said, based on what? She had the most magnificent answer I think I've ever heard, which is, those people know me, and they know that when I put my name on something, I work at it relentlessly, night and day, weekends and holidays, and when my name is on it, it will not fail. It didn't make me any more confident in the business, but it made me immensely more confident in this young woman as someone who will grow up to be an exceptional entrepreneur.
I would like, now that we talk a bit about our regional state of education for startups, and I would like to ask the speakers, who do you think is the best position to provide such education in Bulgaria and the region?
I think what we're seeing already, it's other entrepreneurs. And that's what's exciting about the emergence of the ecosystem here with 11 and with Launch Hub, which involves a lot of successful people already. It's really handing those skills down generation to generation.
I think we can say that somewhat we've been in this business for some time. And to me, I would go back to a question of, do we teach entrepreneurship, in developing skills? And I think this is really what it is, and then finding the right tools. Entrepreneurship is not a degree you could get, but what we really need is to be something that is pervasive everywhere throughout the educational system, more as an attitude and an approach to the way we are teaching and then learning. And so to be based on a process of discovery, and being interactive, being really involved in that process. So I think, to me, actually one of the solutions is that it needs to be offered as a cross-disciplinary field and theme throughout all of the different majors, and also to be developed as a way of behavior and mindset from very early age on.
Can you suggest who can do that?
Who can do that? I think our organization is one of those that is doing this in one way, but I think it should be, all of the universities should be striving to do that. And then the way to do it is also to invite the right role models and the right people to transfer the spirit and that different kind of approach, and also showing by example. So.
And I would like to add to this question and address, Bob, do you think entrepreneurship education belongs to a business school?
Not particularly. I think that's where it's found a home. For example, at Columbia University, there is a huge debate now about how do we break this out of the business school and involve the medical school, the School of Public Affairs, the journalism school, the law school, and in some of my classes I have social ventures coming from SIPA, the School of International Public Affairs, with ideas that are never going to make anybody a lot of money, but they're going to change hundreds or thousands of lives, often in the third world. And to me, some of the skills are business skills, some of them are life skills, and some of them are engineering skills. And so we need to make all of those skills accessible to groom really successful entrepreneurs. A successful entrepreneur doesn't have to be an engineer, but they have to have had a course in how to have a conversation with an engineer. Here is what I want you to build. Here is how I think it will work in a language the engineer will understand. That's a life skill, whether your next job is a startup or a bank. And so I think very few universities are really doing this successfully, because universities like to compartmentalize. Oh, we teach journalism over there, entrepreneurship over here, math and science over there. And I think you need a little bit of all of those things, right? An entrepreneur who can't read a balance sheet is going to get in trouble very quickly, probably, rather urgently. And so there are really so many disciplines that touch on, successful entrepreneurs. And I think the other big difference between entrepreneurial education and other forms of education, right, if you are going to become a surgeon, the way they teach you to remove a piece of somebody's brain is you watch one, you assist in one, and you do one, right? Very little classroom learning. The same is true for entrepreneurship. And every young person who says to me, I want to start a company, I want to be an entrepreneur, I said, what is your hurry? You're 22 years old. Why don't you first spend a year making coffee and cleaning the toilets and doing crap work at the smartest startup you can find that will let you in. And in exchange for cleaning the toilets, you get to sit in the conference room when the bright leaders of that startup are having conversations about, and you can understand how it works and how they think and how they make decisions and operate. And that, to me, is the closest thing to a PhD in entrepreneurship, as opposed to taking lectures from the many great scholars at universities all over the world.
I'd like now to take yet another question from the audience and ask our participants in the panel today, if they were 20 today and with no money and no idea, with all your knowledge, what business would you start and why?
Well, I was going to say, I think I would start a counterfeiting operation, because it's the fastest way to a great deal of revenue, and sooner or later you get a very long vacation with 3 meals and a cot. Unfortunately, with no Wi-Fi because you're in prison. God, that's a very difficult piece.
Can I defer back to Bob's last point about cleaning the toilets at a bright startup? I wouldn't suggest someone who's 20 with no money and no idea starts a business.
I think that's great.
You should start a business when you have a fantastic idea for a business, not when you want to start a business.
Well, and if I could just add one thing to that, you should start a business. Finding a business to start as an entrepreneur is no different than falling in love. It's not the first man or woman you meet, or the third or the eighth, or the one in the fancy suit or the hot dress. It's the one that makes your heart go thump, thump, thump. That's the business I want to devote my life to. The way you say about your future spouse, that's the spouse I want to have as my life partner, because in any startup, there are lots of dark days. What's going to get you through those dark days is not how much money you might make someday. It's, do I love going to work every day? Does that love and excitement carry me through the difficult times? Because without that, The dreams of wealth are just not enough to get you through the many, many challenges and deep, dark days you're going to have in almost any startup.
I would like now that we go for our last question in this panel, and I'd like the participants to recommend to all of us their top 3 actionable ideas to improve the general culture about entrepreneurship in Bulgaria and the region. What can we do when we walk out of this room?
Well, I've been picking up, I've been out here for about 12 years in Southeast Europe, and I think talking to some of the people running the accelerators here now as well, the problem is ideas. There's lots of people who want to do startups, there's lots of very skilled and brilliant people. My biggest complaint is about context. People need to have a very big context, and as Bob and the others were saying in their talks, you need to know every single competitor. You need to know everything happening in your space, and people have trouble doing that sitting here. So I'd say the actionable thing is really build big networks, travel whenever you can, meet anyone you can who travels here, and try to get a very big context to understand what you're doing within that.
Would you like to add?
I think the most important thing an emerging entrepreneurial economy can do is get the successful entrepreneurs out of the closet and celebrate them and make them accessible to the aspiring entrepreneurs. Have them host or host for them coffees or luncheons where they can just not lecture, but have general sort of freewheeling discussions about the issues on the entrepreneur's mind, because that unlocks an incredibly powerful resource. The second thing, which may be Milena's next project, I hope, is to create a sort of network infrastructure. I mean, think of the immense talent sitting in this room. You may have this tiny little startup that is still a long way from success, but you are a fabulous e-marketer or database architect or front-end designer. Make yourself available to your peers. Trade a few hours of your time with another company for a few hours from a third company that helps you in an area you're weak. In other words, sort of facilitate the networking among the vast talent pool in this room so you can help one another succeed and grow in the areas where you're weaker. I think that, is, to me, is a great way to unlock a tremendous natural resource here in Bulgaria and to accelerate the pace for all of you.
Thank you.
I think really one of the best ways we could accelerate this is to support the efforts of each other, to be collaborative, and really to spread the word and also the behavior that being an entrepreneur could be just the future, a career opportunity for everyone. And to really promote this in the schools. And I'm really serious about that, because I think in a sense, we're still in Bulgaria trying to do things in the last moment and more short term rather than longer term. And the more we really look at this as being something that we can benefit, as also everyone around us can benefit in a good way, you know, experience that it will support. So the more you give from you, also to support the development of the kids, of the younger people, this is really a great way to contribute and to push this forward.
Can I turn that into an actionable point? The great thing about social networks and networking is it's reciprocal. The more you give to your network, the more you get back. Echoing what everyone has said, I would suggest that everybody in the room tries to find somebody else they can mentor. And if everyone is mentoring somebody behind them, everyone will be getting mentored by somebody ahead of them as well. And that's how you really strengthen your whole ecosystem.
That's a great. The one thing I would just like to comment on is something Milena just said. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone. And the sooner you can determine whether you have the drive and the determination and the willingness to give up your friends, your soccer games, your beer parties, to put your head down and work relentlessly on your startup, it's just not for everyone. And even those who are willing to work that hard, most will not really succeed. And so the sooner you can sort of personally evaluate your own desires, you know, if you want to have puppies and play a lot of soccer and play a lot of darts with your friends in a pub, maybe you should get a date, you know, a regular job. And an old partner of mine used to say, some people work to live. Entrepreneurs live to work. And it's a dramatic difference in the way you are setting the tone of your life. And you should recognize that and confront that individually, you know, as soon as you can.
I think these were great pieces of advice that you gave to our audience. So let's thank our panel participants for their thoughts. Thank you very much. I think there is a break right now, and we'll be looking forward to meeting you again.
There's no break. Okay, guys. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot again. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.